How do you discern your vocational calling? How do I figure out? I get it, Reagan, you're saying. I'm supposed to be living as a redeemed creature in whatever God's given me to do. But how do I figure out what that main thing is, that job, that career? What should I be pursuing? Let me give you a couple principles that you can sort of apply as you try to discern this. The first principle is exercise faithful action plus prayerful reflection. What do I mean by that? Faithful action. It's been said that you can't turn a car that's not driving, right? You can turn the steering wheel if you have power steering, but you're not going anywhere. You can't actually maneuver it. And I think this is very true. You see this in the scriptures too. It's those who are in action, those who are being faithful with a little, that God puts over much. And so frequently, if you're trying to discern your calling, you got to get up and get going. Be faithful with what you know is true already. What do I know from the scriptures that I'm supposed to be faithful in? Like, go to that second circle. What is it that Christians are called to do? Can I be faithful in that? And what can I do that I know faithfulness looks like in these domains of stewardship right now? Right? Maybe the job you're in, or the main thing you're focused on right now, you're thinking, I'm not sure this is my calling, but I don't know what my calling is. What you can do is be faithful in the season that you're in. Say, I'm not going to slack us on my job because I think, well, this isn't really what I'm supposed to be doing. Hey, it's where God has you right now. So it is what you're supposed to be doing right now. So while you figure out that next step, do what you've been given to do with full vigor, with both hands, without slacking off, because do that excellently. That's what you're called to right now. But also do that with prayerful reflection. So yes, you act faithfully with what you've been given, but be praying, Lord, give me wisdom like you promise in the book of James, that anyone who asks, you'll give wisdom without reproach. I want to have wisdom because I want to know exactly the place you would have me to serve you best. Very often, this is the first thing I ask people when they're like, I'm trying to figure out my calling. I say, well, have you prayed about it? And it's either like, oh yeah, I prayed about it. I'm like, how often? They're like, I prayed, once about it. It's like, bro, if you want to know how you can best glorify God with your life, start by asking him. Pray without ceasing. Be persistent in that prayer. Lord, where would you have me serve you? Open the door. Make it clear to me. Start with asking for wisdom. But do that as you're exercising faithfulness. And guess what? You and the Lord are perfectly aligned on this. He wants you to maximally glorify him with your life too. So that's a great prayer to ask, because it's confirmed by two promises. We're told that we always get a yes answer to prayer, that if we ask anything according to his will, you know that you have it. Jesus tells his disciples. So is it according to God's will that I ask how I can best glorify him? I think it is. And we have in James the promise that if anyone asks for wisdom, you know that you have it. These are both guaranteed yes prayers. So pray that. Then you go to sort of the natural next step. What am I gifted in? What am I drawn to, right? This question of gifting and interest. I think that this is important. Very often people skip over the first step and people are like, what's my calling? Well, what are you passionate about, man? I'm passionate about playing video games and eating Cheetos. I think that's my calling. No, you got to have some context to this, obviously, right? But it is true that God has created each of us uniquely. This is one of the reasons you should believe in the doctrine of vocation. We aren't clone troopers here, man, right? We're not, I make a Star Wars reference, that we're not all carbon copies of each other. It is one body, many members, differently gifted, knit together individually in our mother's wombs. And that's part of the beauty of what God is doing. He's sovereignly in control of all things, and he made you fit to a purpose. Even Ephesians 2:10, which we reference a lot here, he's in advance created the good works for you to walk in. You have a mission as a Christian, a particular mission that you're on, that God wants you to glorify you on, some good works he wants you in particular to walk in. So ask about those in prayer, but think about, what are the things the Lord's gifted me in uniquely? I'm talking skills, I'm talking spiritual gifts, I'm talking opportunities and interests too. God doesn't just want us to, sometimes people make this weird decision-making criteria where they say, well, I just figure whatever the hardest thing is and the thing I least want to do, that's the thing God wants me to do. And I'm like, what God are you talking about? You think he just wants to torture you? It is true that God does call us to do hard things, but that's a terrible decision-making criteria. That's a terrible way to discern his will. Say, I think God wants for me whatever the thing that I hate the most. Bro, God, he is your father. He loves you. If even wicked fathers give bread to their children, don't you think God gives good things to his children too? Look at your giftings, look at the unique things you have to steward, the interests of yours, and think, hey, maybe there's a way I can glorify him in these things. I'll give a personal anecdote about this. I believe very strongly that God has called me to the ministry I'm doing right now of redeeming productivity. This is a weird ministry. It's not a category of, someone could have said, hey, why don't you start? I think that the thing you're supposed to do, and fill out this career profile, the thing you're supposed to be doing with your life is make videos and podcasts and courses and write books on how Christians can get things done, but do it in a way that Christians should. Like, what even is that? I look back at my life and I saw that my interests in video, in the Bible, obviously, in productivity, in the different seasons God put me through in life, working at a missions agency, working with some of these big ministries, and even getting to go to seminary, all these different things sort of lined up that actually where I'm standing right now, in hindsight, my interests, my giftings, my opportunities, it makes perfect sense that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'll tell you another thing, I find it incredibly fulfilling. I do feel in a subjective way that I'm doing what God's called me to do. And again, I don't think that's an open and shut case, that if you feel discontent about where you're at, then that means that's not your calling. But I am saying that, I guess just anecdotally, my experience has been that when you really are leaning into the thing God's particularly uniquely gifted you to do, there is a sense of pleasure and enjoyment in that. And that makes sense, doesn't it, from a God who loves you and who's ready, fit, and made you for a particular way to glorify him in this life. You think about the movie Chariots of Fire, and it's about Eric Liddell, the Olympic runner who's a Christian, and he says that line about, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Or the longer quote is something like, why do you run? Well, I run because God made me fast, and when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And it's this acknowledgement that I think when you're lined up with what God's given you to do, there is joy in that. There is satisfaction. It's not always easy, obviously, but there's this deep sense of purpose that God created us for. And if I could just encourage you, God has made you for a purpose. If I could quote VeggieTales, God made you special and he loves you very much. He wants to use you in a particularly unique way to glorify him. And seeking that out is not selfish. It's not some kind of arrogant ambition. It's not being worldly. It's saying, God, how can I best glorify you? Would you lead me to the answer to that? When you're seeking out your calling, you got to ask, can I do this with a clear conscience? So when you're thinking vocationally, career, job, whatever, can I do this with a clear conscience? You're not going to be doing something unethical or that is compromising your conscience. You're not able to do that to the glory of God. And so that's another thing that sort of helps you, shut doors of opportunities. Just, you can rule them out right away. I know God's not called me to that thing because I can't do that with a clear conscience. That's not right. And the last one is just sort of the big, wide open criteria. When you're asking, hey, I think God's calling me to this thing, ask this question. Through this vocation, can I serve others as a redeemed creature? And can I glorify God through it? Can I love my neighbor as myself? And can I love the Lord, my God, with my heart, soul, strength, and mind through this vocation in it? Not just seeing it as a vehicle for, it'll make me money so I can give it to missions, or, maybe it'll have opportunities for evangelism. Those things are great. But your vocation is not merely some incidental thing that you happen to be doing, that you have to do so that you can do the more important spiritual tasks. And your vocation doesn't matter. No, it does matter. And you can do it as unto the Lord. And so ask those questions. Go through some of these as you're thinking, what has the Lord called me to? How can I best glorify him?